2 rest days to prepare for this big grand final. How much prep does he really bring into this one? And we're being told that all the fair play checks are done, completed, and we are ready to start the championship fight. Alireza, Firouzja, they're also looking ready to go. There's a bit of twinning going on. I feel like they're sitting in the same pose right now. That's not a classic chess player pose.
We're being told that Magnus has been penalized 3 minutes for being late, which I think Magnus would be the first to approve. None of the players get special treatment if you're late to the party. If you spend too long at the restaurant, too many minutes in the shower, you get penalized in your first game. Magnus starting with 7 minutes on the clock. Something tells me, Tanya, he's not too broken up about it. And he's going to make that time up with his incredible level of opening mastery as we have a Ruy Lopez in the first game. Magnus has the white pieces and a G6 setup by Mr. Firouzja.
We've seen Magnus in the World Blitz Championship arriving 2.5 minutes late for a 3-minute game, and with 30 seconds on the clock going on to crush his opponent. This one, like you said, he's got a 3-minute deficit. And I think, Daniel, that sets a really good precedence. We saw that happen for Jan Tristov Duda as well. Magnus arriving late. He's got to pay for it. But does that also add additional pressure on Alireza, Firouzja now? Mind games here. That you feel you've got these extra minutes on the clock. So you really should be making the most of your chances, even though you've got the black pieces.
That's a great point. But then there's the negative pressure of, why am I not making the most of it? My coach, one time, the default time in the US for forfeiture is 1 hour. One time I was playing round 1 of a tournament. My opponent came 58 minutes late and blew me off the board. And afterward, my coach said, that creates so much pressure on you to exploit the fact that you have more time. What he recommended I do is just sit for 57 minutes on the first move, just to level the playing field, just so you don't have that additional onus of having to prove that you're better with more time on the clock. It's something to think about. And I like the way that Alireza is handling the opening. He's handling it the same way he would if Magnus had 10 minutes on his clock, pushing d5, creating that very typical Ruy Lopez pressure in the center, where Magnus is now the one calling the shots. He has to decide whether he's playing e takes d5 or if he's keeping the tension, potentially allowing Alireza's pawn to move down to d4.
And if that pawn moves down to d4 at the right moment, the bishop on e3 might feel like it doesn't have too many squares. So big decisions to be made. Do you trade off in the center immediately? Do you first perhaps pick up the knight, trade the bishop for the knight, and make black play on with a worse pawn structure on the queen side, a double c pawn, but it comes with its own set of advantage. You've moved one of the side pawns towards the center, also opened up your b file, and that's the approach that Magnus has taken to this position because he's got the follow-up in his mind. And there is massive tension on the board, 4 pawns facing each other. Who blinks first? What are you expecting in this one?
Well, it's a great call, Tanya, predicting bishop takes c6 and following up with the creation of this pawn cube in the center. The point is that the e5 pawn is now under attack. So if Alireza takes on e4, Magnus will jump into e5 with his knight. I think we're going to get a bunch of trades in the center. I think Alireza might be best advised to start with e takes d4, and then we might get a total liquidation in the center and potentially an endgame in the first game, which is exactly what I think Magnus is looking for. He wants that slightly better endgame. He wants a relatively quiet position to start this match, especially with less time on his clock. So I'm going to put this on the board really quickly as Alireza ponders this incredibly tense situation in the center. If he plays e takes d4, one possibility is that we get this total liquidation. Knight e4, bishop g7, king g7, knight e4. Can't take with the rook because you're going to end up with an undefended queen. So I wouldn't be surprised, Tanya, if this endgame arose on the board. I think it's a slight edge for Magnus. And in the meantime, Alireza has made a different decision. He's played d takes e4, keeping the queens on the board, and now undermining the knight with the move c6, c5. Magnus has responded with knight b3, and the moves are coming in hot and fast.
An extremely energetic play here by Alireza. One gets the feeling that black has managed to neutralize white's pressure with a lot of trades in the center and a potential weakness coming up for Magnus with that isolated queen's pawn, because I really don't see any other way of actually capturing on d4. You have to either take it with the pawn. maybe there, yes, he does go with c takes d4 because I think there are too many tactics to calculate if you were to take it with the bishop, and Alireza's knight nicely placed to land on that very key square right in front of the isolated queen's pawn. A very thematic idea that controls so many squares. Up on the clock, liking black's position. Daniel, would you agree that things have gone great for Alireza so far?
Yeah, this is a good start for Alireza. I think the position's about dynamically equal. Magnus has some assets as well. He's got the possibility of long-term pressure against this isolated pawn on c7. Rook c1 is kind of an automatic follow-up move. Alireza's also not rushing to put a knight on d5. That's probably because he can also put a bishop on d5, which is a more defensive type of approach, over protecting this e4 pawn. The other thing I'd point out is that if he does play knight d5, I wouldn't get too broken up about the prospect of losing a pawn on e5 if I'm Magnus. There's no way that Alireza decides to give up his fianchettoed bishop, even for this beautiful stallion on e5. But both players are, of course, always keeping an eye on the safety of their king. That's not currently the center of the battle, but if black takes on e5, it certainly will become the main thing that white is focused on. So Alireza taking a very long think here. The time situation already close to equalizing. So again, that 3-minute time penalty is largely a thing of the past. Magnus, Alireza, both with a hand on their head. Very hard to get a read on their body language. I think they're just settling in for a complicated equal middle game.
It's a very tense fight, and that's exactly what you come to expect when these two are on the board, given Alireza's style. And I want to come back to the point that you were making earlier at the start of the show. We spoke about how many games you played against Magnus, and you very nicely broke down some of his biggest strengths in speed chess. What about Alireza? We all know the famous brawls you've had against him as well. What do you think is Alireza's biggest strength that lets him get so far down in these tournaments and be such a dangerous player to Magnus?
Well, there's a couple of things. First of all, his bullet acumen. I know that it's memed on a lot as we see bishop b7 inviting Magnus's other knight to jump into a5 or c5, but his ability in increment time scrambles is very, very powerful. He's able to take a lot of these 50-50 games where both players have just a couple seconds left. I've lost a lot of Title Tuesday games to Alireza when we both are just making moves on increment. He's able to calculate really, really quickly, and obviously unbalanced positions with material imbalances, positions with an element of tactics where king safety is not to be celebrated. Those are the kinds of positions that he wants to get. And right now, I think we have a position that's up Magnus's alley. Both sides' kings are safe. It's all about positional pressure. It's all about exploiting minor weaknesses. And that is why I think Alireza is burning this much clock. Queen d2, typical Magnus move. What about king h7? Nope, you're going to drop your f7 pawn. If you have to play a move like h5, Tanya, you're making serious dark square weaknesses on the king side. And much like a boa constrictor, Magnus already starting to surround some of these weaknesses in black's position. Bishop d5, excellent response from Firouzja.
Offense is the best defense. He says, you take my kingside pawn, I will get to the central d4 pawn as well. We see a trade on h6. The b3 knight now can be picked up, and that leaves the d4 pawn soft and tender to be grabbed. He's done it. The knight on e5 under attack. No, not many great squares. You can fall back with the knight to c4. I don't believe that you have time for any kingside sacrifices. It just feels like you will not have enough firepower to assist the queen for a checkmate on black's king.
Definitely something to calculate, something to consider in a hyperbolic game, but not in a rapid time control. Knight takes g6. The king's going to run to f. I mean, actually, I think Magnus is calculating it. I think that's why he's devoting some time to this position. But ultimately, knight c4 would be his choice in a regular time format, not in this time format. Knight takes g6. Who's playing right now? Is it Magnus? Has Mikhail Tal taken over the computer? What do we make of this? Knight takes g6 on the board.
Unbelievable. Daniel, it just felt like you don't have enough pieces to give checkmate. There's one queen, and notice how that queen on d4 now defends the knight on f6. So you're not regaining any material. I don't even see a perpetual. You need to find a way to get the rook into the game. You have to bring in more pieces to the party. But the black queen has a really nice spot on e5 to guard everything. Where is the attack? How are you finishing this off, or what does Magnus have in mind? I don't really see a knockout blow here.
He's following Tal's advice. Sacrifice first, think later. Just kidding. I don't think Mikhail Tal ever said that. He did say that there are two types of sacrifices, objectively correct ones and mine. And this is definitely in the second category. Magnus definitely sacrificing first and thinking later. What I will say, Tanya, is that he does have 2 pawns for the minor piece. So it's not like he's giving up a knight for nothing. I'm still just as skeptical. I think that he's trying to find an off-ramp at this point. And one off-ramp potentially is queen e5, rook to a5. Don't be surprised if he deflects this queen with another sacrifice in order to pick up this knight with a check. That's what Alireza is trying to avoid. So Firouzja, thinking about where to put his queen, I'm actually partial to the move queen b6 so that the move rook a5 does not come with tempo. But if I'm playing this with Magnus with black, I'm just as scared, even though he might be running out of pieces.
And the deeper you dive into this position, the more you think about it, there are dangers everywhere. Let's just point out that there are 3 good squares for the queen because it needs to stay connected to the knight on f6. You could consider queen to e5, queen to b6 that you pointed out, and the b2 pawn can also be picked up. You snap up a pawn, you still defend the knight on f6. But I think intuitively, Daniel, you wanted to play queen to b6 because it's the one square that stops white's rook from attacking that key black queen. And if you've got time, maybe just a few seconds, you could quickly show the lines on the board. How queen e5 would have perhaps just been busted to rook a5.
You're absolutely right. White wins the game. And this is not just a draw for people to realize. Like, it's not just, oh, you get a perpetual now. No, rook d7 and white wins the game. Mate is unstoppable because Magnus has this Luft square for his king. So queen e5 would have lost. Maybe this is what appealed to Magnus about the sacrifice. There's another deflection if black plays c5. The problem is that Alireza wasn't born yesterday. And this is why I said this is a great option in a bullet game, but not with 5 minutes on the clock. Look at Firouzja, knight h7. Do you think I'm taking that rook of yours? Absolutely not. Rook a5 doesn't create a concrete threat. Alireza simply drops his knight back, creating a little security blanket for his king. And now Magnus has to think about maybe even trading queens and trying to eke out a draw in that resulting endgame. This was fun for the fans, but not necessarily for Magnus fans, as he stubbornly keeps the queens on the board, setting up the threat of rook d7, Tanya. This game can still turn around in his favor if Alireza makes a blunder. For example, rook a d8, you can still play rook d7. How easy is that to miss? e3.
Very, unless you're Alireza Firouzja. Look at the precision that he's playing with. He grabs the material and then he defends like a total boss, right? Queen b6, what a move. And then he throws in e3 for the offense. And I have a feeling that Magnus might have missed this resource because now you can grab that pawn coming in with a check and find a way to stop that 7th rank attacks with at least the rook stepping onto e7. Daniel, if he survives the attack, Alireza might just take this game 1. He's up a piece.
He's up a piece, but Magnus does have 2 pawns. And even if the queens come off the board, which they very well might, if we see queen e2 by Firouzja, Magnus has excellent drawing chances because his rooks are active. He's got the connected passer. So I think the likeliest result of this game is actually a draw as things currently sit. There was another incredible line. If we could very, very quickly bring up an analysis board, I promise people it's worth it. After e3, if Magnus had played rook to d7, after ef king h2, you don't make a queen, you actually make a knight. We would have seen an under promotion. The king has to step back, and the knight jumps back to g3 with a fork. This might be another detail that Magnus Carlsen overlooked, but I'm going to take us right back to the current position. Rook a to d8 by Firouzja, trying to get pieces off the board. And Tanya, I think that Magnus is not too worried here. He could even consider trading queens. At this point, we should mention rook and king versus rook, knight, and king is a theoretical draw.
Yes, if all the pawns are off the board, but that c pawn still remains. And Alireza will try to push it. If the queens do get traded, you still have some work to do to try to trade those 2 pawns. I know this sounds ridiculous, but can you even think about picking up a 3rd pawn for compensation of the knight? And the only reason I suggest that move is, Daniel, because the square on d1, the checking square on d1, which would have ended up with disaster. The queen on h5 defends it, and that's not possible. So rook takes pawn on the board. Is Alireza just going to repeat, or will he try for more? Is he going to get ambitious in this one? We're going to find out on this move.
That was a great call, Tanya. Just realizing that black doesn't actually have any ultra dangerous checks. Right now, Magnus is trying to figure out where to put his king, because king g1 and king h1 look like they're kind of the same move. King g1, common chess wisdom dictates that you shouldn't expose yourself to unnecessary checks. So if you just played a move based on your intuition, it's king h1. The problem is that blunders the rook to queen f1. And Magnus Carlsen, I was a little bit worried because he was taking a long time there. This is a very easy fork to miss. You forget about pieces that are hanging on the other side of the board. But no, he sidesteps this landmine. And I think that with 90 seconds left, there's no reason for Alireza to do anything crazy here. I think we're going to see a perpetual check imminently.
I have a feeling he's going to try to get more. You don't get this kind of a position or this sort of a chance against Magnus Carlsen too often. And when you've got something to play for, the thing is you have to fight it out till the very end. It might still be a draw, and we see the objective evaluation remains pretty level so far. But knowing Alireza, I think he's going to make Magnus try to fight just a little more, earn that draw, and not just give into it. And now we have it. He goes for it.
Well, Magnus just stepped out of the shower. He's not in the mood to sweat. But that's exactly what he's going to be doing. And I'm looking at his own clock. He's down to 90 seconds. Alireza setting up some threats with rook g8, just deciding, hey, I've got nothing to lose. I'm not risking here at all. This knight on h7, I just want to spotlight how good of a defender it is, covering the king, keeping it safe from all sorts of checks. And now it's up to Magnus to defend with precision, which he's done throughout his career. Does Alireza have an actual threat here? I think he does. Queen e3 is a mate threat, because then if you play king h1, the queen zigzags around to g3. That is why Magnus drops his queen back to e2. A very savvy defensive move.
Really nice spot there, Daniel. So rook to g8, had a sneaky big idea, stopped, and now again, the ball's in Alireza's court. He can finish this off. He can take a draw, and it's not a result that you're not proud of with the black pieces to start this match with the draw. But given the position, having still that extra piece alive, again, I don't think we're going to see a repetition at this point. This is just Alireza trying to gain those extra seconds on the clock. Daniel, I don't even see a way for Magnus to clearly take this to an endgame. There is no more queen trade, but we saw a repetition, and that's it. It's game one in the books, as Alireza doesn't get more than a draw in this one. What a game this was. Daniel, Magnus sacrificing a piece, starting with a 3-minute deficit. Do you think this is a bit of a moral victory for Magnus, given the time disadvantage that he had?
Well, definitely, I think against a lesser player, Alireza would have kept that game going, but he knows how precise Magnus is at defending these positions, and a shocking knight sacrifice. At one point, it looked like Magnus was staring down the barrel of an early disaster, but you know, that ability to dial it back, that ability to say, yeah, that was not very good, that was not my finest moment, let me bring my pieces back and get that half point. That's one of the many things that makes Magnus so hard to beat. Still, a very positive result for Alireza, drawing with the black pieces, Tanya, from a position of strength. You really can't ask for more.